Well, good morning and welcome back to the Broadcast Retirement Network. I'm Jeff Snyder. This is BRN AM for Monday, February 10th, 2020. And our top stories this morning are student loans redlined and young Americans don't necessarily like job hopping. Well, it's Social Media Monday, and that means a look at the latest social media trends in personal finance, retirement, markets, so much more. And joining us from the Cayman Islands today, Devin Banerjee, Senior Financial Services Editor for LinkedIn. Devin, great to see you. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Absolutely, Jeff. Thanks for having me.
And just real quick, before we jump into our top story, which is student loan redlining, where might you be this in the Grand Caymans? What's going on there?
Yeah, it's an annual conference called the Cayman Alternative Investment Summit. It's been going on for about 6 or 7 years, and I decided to check it out. A great group of global institutional investors and investment managers, and a lot of great conversation going on.
Yeah, we'll certainly check it out. And you can follow Devin. He has been doing live feeds, which is amazing, on the LinkedIn platform. So check him out. You can certainly follow him on LinkedIn. So Devin, our top story, the potential for redlining student loans. I want to get your perspective on this. This is a big story in general, but a big story on the LinkedIn platform, apparently.
Absolutely. It sparked a lot of conversation, was one of our top featured stories of the week. So redlining in education is typically refers to actually a now illegal practice of refusing loans, student loans, based on where students live. A new study is coming out and saying that there's something similar to redlining going on, where lenders are adjusting rates and charging students more based on where they're actually going to college. So you attend a four-year college, you'll pay less interest. You go to a junior college, you may pay more. You go to Harvard, you pay less. You go to Howard University, you're paying more. And so this nonprofit, the Student Borrower Protection Center, came out with this study, this report, actually naming and shaming a couple institutions, really putting Wells Fargo in the hot seat for these.
Like they need some bad press.
I know. They've really had a lot coming at them. Wells, of course, I should just note, a spokesperson in the story, said that they believe, they abide by all laws and regulations. Mm-hmm. But this nonprofit, the Student Borrower Protection Center, is coming out and saying that we should really be very attentive to this booming use of alternative data used in determining credit decisions. And so lenders now have access to all of this granular data, things like where you live and stuff like that, which is illegal redlining, but now where you go to school, other behavioral traits, all that kind of stuff. And so this nonprofit is kind of not blowing the whistle, but trying to wake everyone up to the fact that this boom in alternative data, which a lot of people tout as a real asset in credit and lending, can really exacerbate inequality, or it can violate laws, unless it's sort of combined in a mosaic, way with other information and other standardized information.
And it just reminds me, I think we had a conversation, I don't know if it was you or I, but we had a conversation about credit scores. Maybe it was Dan Klein, talking about credit scores from the Motley Fool, and how the credit scores, they're all different, right? And they all use all this different information. And you and I have talked in the past about data, and last week we talked about data as it relates data-driven marketing. And it just seems to me like there's data's great, but it's an overuse in this case of data. And I guess I'm just not seeing the connection between where you go to school, other than you're making the leap that if you go to Harvard, you're going to make more money over time. I'm not getting it. I just don't get it.
Yeah, I mean, actually, one interesting thing was in Wells Fargo's statement, they noted, which of course every lender notes, and this is the fundamental of the business, but they're trying to evaluate, the likelihood of repayment and stuff like that. But it's not, I mean, that goes into, the volume of the loan and stuff like that. But kind of making that judgment call about not, you go to a state school or a junior college means your ability to pay off the volume of the loan and the terms agreed to. That judgment is kind of crossing the line, many people are saying. And this conversation also reminded me about something you and I spoke about maybe a year and a half ago on the podcast, which is the rise of alternative ways to fund an education or to finance an education. And we saw a few LinkedIn members point this out. And one of the most novel ways are these things called ISAs, income share agreements, where students effectively are selling equity in themselves, you might say, or selling an ownership of their future income stream. And this started as talk and kind of a creative idea a couple of years ago. Now it's actually being implemented, most notably at Purdue University in Indiana, under Mitch Daniels, the former Indiana governor, who's now president of Purdue, is really pioneering this, and it's in place. I looked at their website about an hour ago, and it's right there. It's an alternative to taking out a loan.
And what's been the feedback? Obviously, this is not the norm. Have you gotten a sense for any feedback on the program? From a practical point of view, I kind of like that, right? You're taking a bet on yourself. You're going to school. It kind of makes you really think about whether or not you want to do this, right? If your rear end, your neck is on the line to pay back this loan, that's a big deal. Or not loan, but you're selling equity in yourself. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. In terms of ISAs, I think a lot of the news that's been out there and the storytelling has been around just their creation. I don't think the data has really been run on that. I would love to see Purdue, report out the kind of success, you might call it, or at least some qualitative results of that. I will say more people are looking into ISAs. I had this conversation last summer with Tony James, an executive at Blackstone. He's a billionaire investor, and he was telling me at this dinner that he personally is actually trying to spend more time thinking about ISAs as sort of a securitized financing tool, which tells you a bit about where we are in the cycle, that we're looking for more yield. Investors are looking for more creative ways to earn a return. But I mean, it is something that if everyone agrees to and it's not abused, I think it could grow in popularity.
Certainly. And Devin, I want to just go back real quick to this issue of redlining or potentially redlining based on other factors. Do we see, I don't know who this would cover. Is it the Federal Trade Commission? Is it, the Banking Commission? I don't know what the entity is, but I got to think that someone would take a look at these practices. And secondly, and I'm sorry for hitting you with all this, is this something that's a result maybe of a change in administration? So we had the Obama administration, which I think was a little bit more lenient, a little more strict on the banks, but a little bit more lenient on student loans. And now we've flipped with the Trump administration kind of reversing that. So I hit you with two questions. You answer the one you want.
No, I would say that I think regulators are paying attention to at least, I don't know if student loans in particular, or at least this element, but generally this use of alternative data in credit decisions. If you remember, about 2 months ago, there was a bit of a kerfuffle. Steve Wozniak, the co-founder of Apple, tweeted that, with his new Apple Goldman Sachs card, that his wife had received more onerous terms or something than he did, even though they share finances, and he kind of wanted that investigated, and a government agency, I don't know which one, did pick that up and was investigating it. So I would say government agencies, I think, are responsible on this. I'm not sure if they're looking into the specific flavor of education redlining, but I'm sure after reports like this and the stories that were written about it this week, that it's something that they'll take a look at.
Yeah, certainly. Well, thanks for bringing this to our attention, Devin. I want to hold you over, and we come back, we'll talk to Devin about job hopping, not job hopping for he and I, but job hopping as it relates to younger folks out there. So stay tuned right here on BRN AM. Imagine a new television network that will make you richer, healthier, and in control of your financial future. This network is for the policewoman in Nashville, Tennessee, the baker in Dubuque, Iowa, the teacher in Lexington, Kentucky. We want to make the idea of savings and retirement culturally relevant. But what do you see as a defining issue of the midterms? Especially for the smaller businesses. I mean, they are the lifeblood of the American economy. Featuring exclusive interviews, current affairs, and docuseries. 33 years old, you retired early.
The philosophy is money only matters if it helps you live a life that you love.
But you got to start thinking about retirement as soon as you get in.
The Broadcast Retirement Network will drive very high engagement with premium partnerships. So this isn't retirement and savings for your parents or grandparents. This is for all Americans. And we're going to change the way you think about money. Welcome to the next frontier of retirement and savings. This is BRN, the Broadcast Retirement Network. Welcome back. We're talking to Devin Banerjee, Senior Financial Services Editor for LinkedIn. Devin, thanks so much for sticking around this morning.
Absolutely, Jeff. Happy to.
And sticking around from a horrible place to be, the Cayman Islands. I know I echo the sentiments of the audience that they feel extremely sorry for you. They had to be in sunny, beautiful Cayman. So let's go from redlining, which is obviously a very serious subject, to job hopping and some very interesting conversations, I believe, on the platform and really kind of goes against what many of us think about job hopping.
Yeah, that's right. There's been this perception out there, Jeff, as you know, and everyone would agree about this perception that younger workers, millennials and the Gen Zers, are kind of flighty, right? They don't stay at companies very long. They want to hop around. They're not loyal to employers and stuff like that. And the data is really starting to show that changing. And I think culturally, these age groups and this population is starting to change. So a new survey from workflow software company Zapier showed that millennials actually on average today want to stay with an employer for 10 years on average. Gen Zers are saying about 6 years, which fits more with the perception. But if you dig into it, it starts to make more sense. And so the survey found that these workers are increasingly kind of tying their work to their identity and saying that work is part of their lives. Almost 3/4 of them are saying it's part of their identity. And what I think is happening, and this isn't based on research or LinkedIn data or anything, but just something that I've been following and you and I have talked about a lot. I think the tide is kind of turning. All the information and data we've seen about these younger workers looking for more meaning in their work and seeking out employers where they can have an impact and where their work has an impact on the broader society and broader world. What I think may be happening is that has been happening, and these younger workers are finding these employers. And once they find them where they align with their values and align with their visions and their missions, then they want to stay. And so I think that's starting to happen. If you think about millennials, also they're no longer the youngest age group. They're people up to I think age 40 at this point. And so I think they're finding these employers where the values align and they want to stay longer. And so that perception that we talked about at the top of the segment, I think, is becoming a bit stale.
And Devin, I would say the millennials go all the way up to age 47. But in all seriousness, and do you think it's part of the maturation process as well? I mean, I kind of, I think it's hard to brand everyone the same, and and that is when you do that, it just shows the fallacy in an argument. But I think that some of it has to do with experience. Is all the things you're saying, but also experience and maturation. People are just learning, like, hey, you jump around and it's not as fulfilling, and the money part doesn't necessarily matter. And I think you're right. As you get to an organization where you align with the values that they have, align with your values, you're more apt to say, look, I don't need that extra $10,000 or $3,000 a year. Because what does that equate to? $25 a pay? $50 a pay? After tax?
I would say there's a certain comfort or at least stability that people who reach this age of, let's say, 30s, 40s, whatever, start to seek out. And actually, what I can share is that every year my team at LinkedIn puts out a top companies list or report. And we're starting to think more about ranking companies by where they allow people to advance their careers, and they provide, training and skill sets for people to have more stable and sound careers. And so I think that is starting to become more of what people seek out and yearn. Whereas, when people are younger or earlier in their careers, maybe they're looking for different experience. They're still making up their mind. They're willing to jump around. But as we see the survey, at least with millennials who, as I said, are now in their 30s and even 40s, I think they're seeking out some of that stability and they want to stay. So again, that perception that they're disloyal and they're job hoppers is becoming a bit outdated.
Yeah, well, I think it was outdated to begin with. That's just my sense. I think it's interesting, and I think as we have talked more about the LinkedIn workforce data that you all generate through the hundreds of millions of people, I think we're able to really bifurcate and segment and learn about this information with people. And then you get the anecdotal things that you and I talk about, where we've been talking about, where you're talking to people on the streets, or you're talking to people in passing. And it really does run counter to the things that we're kind of led to believe about these groups of people. I think that, like any other generation, they want to contribute to society. They want to be part of a better future. Clearly, with activism and ESG being a big focus that we talked about on the podcast yesterday. So, my sense is that we're going to see more of this. And again, this is just anecdotal. I think that people are maturing. Experience is a huge teacher, and we'll see people maybe change their perceptions.
Yeah, and also companies and employers are changing so fast to kind of meet workers where they want to be met. Which is, companies and corporate leaders, as you and I talk about all the time, putting out their values more, taking a stand on issues of the day or issues of the century, like climate change, very important issues, climate, diversity, inclusion. And that makes a young worker or any worker happy and more willing to stay in a job and stay with an employer.
And keeping with that theme, just the last minute of the segment, at the case event that you're at, ESG, just in talking with you on the podcast yesterday, ESG is a big component of the conversations that you're having.
Absolutely, yeah. I hang out with a lot of investors, institutional investors, and also investment managers, and I think both of them are seeing the value in ESG strategies. And the former, the institutional investors that allocate to fund managers, are really putting a lot of pressure on their GPs, their general partners, to both pursue ESG strategies and also monitor and report back with high quality granular data, ESG scores and how the strategy is going. And I'm even seeing investment managers themselves see the value in it. And a lot of it, or some of it at least, is coming from their own workforce. I mean, even in an investment firm with just a handful of investment professionals, the younger ones coming in, are kind of saying generally, and this is anecdotal, but they're saying like, look, I'm entering finance, I'm entering this field, but it's because I want to do so while making a difference or making an impact. And so there's more of that, and there's more pressure on the managing partners and the fund managers to start those strategies at these firms.
Well, Devin, a pleasure seeing you. And I have to ask this question. I see you with a shirt and tie, but are you really wearing shorts and flip-flops?
I'm about to change into that because my day is over here on Eastern time, and I would turn my laptop around, but I can see the beach from here, and there's a taco shack out there, and so I've got my whole night planned.
Tough life. Devin Banerjee, always a pleasure chatting with you. Safe travels, and we will talk to you again later in the week.
Sounds good, Jeff. Take care.
And that wraps up this episode of BRN AM. Hope you found it entertaining and educational all at the same time. Hey, have a financial topic or someone of interest that you think we should talk to? Drop us a line. And don't forget, for all the news in retirement markets, technology, personal finance, and so much more, check out today's edition of The Morning Pulse. So until tomorrow, I'm Jeff Snyder. Keep on saving, and don't forget, roll with the changes.